Welcome to the Shop Tour Reviews mobile office. Let's go! Okay, this may not be our mobile office, but a company called AECOJOY reached out to us and asked us if we'd be willing to review or at least talk about their storage buildings. And we actually had a project in mind, so we asked them to send the 8x10 storage shed. It's not exactly 8x10, it's a little more than 8 feet. It's actually like 97 inches, which posed a little bit of a problem in building a deck to put it on. But anyway, because you have to buy 10-foot material and not 8-foot material, and then you're dealing with, you know, wider than 2 sheets of plywood or wider than the length of plywood. Anyway, you get it. It's a little more than 8 feet. And it's quite a bit less than 10 feet. It's like 114 inches or 114 and a half inches, something like that. So less than 120 inches, less than 10 feet, but again, a little more than 8 feet. Not a huge deal if you're putting it on a concrete slab or what have you. You can build that. We were building it on a deck, kind of a modified deck. Actually something like skids. We actually want to use it to mobilize it a bit. So something else in mind other than a mobile office, because this thing's not insulated and it's not cool, especially in this Florida climate. We're building the deck or the base for the AECOJOY 8x10, well, almost 8x10 shed, and done a couple of things different here, using 2x10s for the length, or 2x8s for the length, and 2x6s on the front side. And then we've drilled some large 1.5 inch holes here, and we're doing that to slide rebar through and use this for a special purpose. We'll show you at a later time. So we've got our decking finished and sealed up the edges. We're going to put some tape on the edges as well, just to try to keep things sealed up as tight as possible. But we've got this all leveled up, decking on, and we're going to start putting the base on. Again, in an effort to keep as much moisture as possible out of this wood, and even though this is kind of a temporary solution, this whole build, we're going to use this zip system stretch tape. Now, typically you can use this around any kind of protrusions, around windows, around doors, plumbing, stacks, anything like that. Let's roll this down here. I can stretch this stuff a ton if I want to. Here, I could easily stretch this stuff a lot more than I am. And you see how good and sticky it is, as well as how well it stretches into place. Again, that's kind of overkill for this job or for this solution, but still showing you how versatile this stretch tape is. But anyway, so AECOJOY sent us out the building. Now, let me lay this out for you that we're talking an 8x10 building. Now, to build that, you'd probably, if you wanted to stick build it out of 2x4s and lumber and plywood, you'd probably be in this for a couple of grand. This is quite a bit cheaper than that, and it shows up in 3 cardboard boxes at about 60 pounds a piece. So you're looking at all in less than 200 pounds for this entire building. Well, that's great for the shipping and the storage and the easeability of moving around the shop, because you can pick up each cardboard box. They're each, you know, less than 60 pounds. But when you think about it, a complete 8x10 building that's less than 200 pounds and it's only held down by 4 screws, same little short screws. And we'll run a little deck screw to sink that down for now. We're not sure if it's going to outlast the first Florida thunderstorm, but we shall see. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you, that it is a pretty light building when it shows up. So it's easy to handle. Again, it's going to show up in 3 cardboard packages. It is easy to handle. However, it is also made of very thin gauge steel. We actually measured it on our steel gauge, and it was on basically the thinnest setting. I believe it's 24 gauge steel. So it is quite light and quite flexible, if you will, and it's held by little bitty screws like this. I don't know, they're probably a little more than a 1/4 inch long. And you get some that are machine screws with screws and nuts, and some that are just metal screws that you screw into little small holes. And be careful, because you can over torque them and obviously strip it out, and then you're dealing with something way more than we intend to deal with when you're buying a metal building like this. Now, most of this shed is held together by these two types of screws right here. So machine screws and nuts, and just some coarse thread, like 1/4 inch long screws. And by the way, be very careful, because these things are very sharp, and I just got cut probably a second time. So again, very careful. There's little pieces of metal that are hanging over on a lot of these edges. Now, it went together pretty easy. I mean, you can follow through with the instructions, and you can follow it page by page, but it really doesn't give you a lot of detail on what to do first in each section. Now, again, if you have any knowledge of building things, you can probably figure it out. But it's not the best, and doesn't give you a lot of written text to follow, just some pictures that you've got to figure out. And some of them are a little bit different than actually what it shows on here, but you can see this time lapse of us actually building this. It would probably take you most of a day to actually build one. With a little help, you maybe knock it out in a half a day or so, but for the most part, you should intend on sinking a day into building this. And they come with these gloves. Highly recommend you wearing these gloves, or maybe even reaching out and getting a pair of better cut-proof gloves, because you will get cuts all over your hands if you're not using gloves, because there's little shards of metal, sharp edges, the corners, all of these things will actually cut you pretty easily. Now, there's not a lot of rigidity to this, but once you do get it together, it does handle pretty well as far as, not being able to shake around. The doors don't seal really well. There's pretty big gaps in between the doors, and there's not a big locking mechanism, which again, you wouldn't expect that out of a shed like this. Great for putting in rakes and shovels, maybe lawnmowers and things like that, and storing those things. As far as leaking, we're not sure how well it's going to handle the watershed, because it comes with all these prefabbed holes in them to match up basically you have a big hole overlying a smaller hole, and then you run the screw into the smaller hole, and that's what holds down like the roof sheathing. But the oval in the large hole in the roof sheathing, the plastic washers that come with it that are supposed to kind of seal any of the exterior, it doesn't totally encapsulate the whole oval. So we think we're probably going to have some water intrusion from that, even though we can't see gaps. We're just talking about metal laying on top of the metal. So you may find some areas where the water tries to seep through those. So don't look for this to be an all sealed in type of unit. Also, the ridge cap doesn't cover a lot of the actual opening at the top of the roof sheathing. So if you get any wind blown rain, you're probably going to get some precipitation running into that peak. With that said, yes, this is not the most rigid structure we have ever built, and it's not going to be like if you stick built something or bought a prefab metal building, something like that. However, this is $500 all in. I think $478 that you can buy on Amazon, have it shipped to your house within probably a day or two, and have it up within a day or two. So if you're looking for cheap storage and maybe looking to just get a couple, 3, 5 years out of this to house some shovels, rakes, lawn equipment, things like that, that's a perfect structure for that. And again, you're talking about very cheap, and you can get started right away. We mounted this on like a skid so that we can pull it around if we need to. And it actually worked quite well. As we mentioned, you're only talking adding 200 pounds on top of whatever the skid's going to weigh you're putting it on. And we built this out of 2x6s and 2x8s, so the deck probably weighs much more than the actual building does, and it pulls around quite nicely with just a small side-by-side. So check it out for yourselves. We'll have a link in the description. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And hey, if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.